commando underneath the kilt.
Okay, with that being said, I think we better get started. Okay, we're up to the Mast Climbing Council, which is chaired by Mr. Kevin O'Shea, and the co-chair is Brad Kruger of Sunbelt Rentals. So, Kevin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes,
Good
sir.
afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, thank you for coming along. We welcome to the graveyard shift, which is tends to be where we reside, and I would definitely take the opportunity to make sure I introduce Brad Kruger from Sunbelt, who's the co-chair of this council, and I've been very interested to hear some of the presentations that have been made, and so we're going to make a presentation on a couple of industry issues that we have talked about in previous council meetings and presentations, and also we'd like to talk a little bit about how we move forward in the strange days that we find ourselves in, and one of the questions we'd like to bring up today and maybe get some input on and offer some input on is how we are going to facilitate operator training in respect to social distancing and sanitization and all these other buzzwords that we've all suddenly come across. And so I want to start with our agenda today. We'll bring up some updates and some topics for discussion that have previously been discussed and look at those. Then go into the COVID-19 considerations, and then open up for any new business that anyone would like to introduce. And if there are any questions, then we'll deal with those at the end before we start drinking beer for the President's virtual soiree. So the first thing that we had talked about previously in some of our meetings was how we as an industry can improve safety performance. And one of the subjects that has come up in the past is sales training, and a proposal as part of an industry betterment, if you like, the betterment of our industry. What do we and how do we train our sales personnel, and what do they need to know? And the second topic that we will cover will be owners' duty of care responsibilities, which is another discussion that we've touched on in the past. And I think Brad and I would like to offer some solutions maybe, or some advice through the SAIA that might be useful out there in the field. And so the first question that comes up is are our sales personnel / estimators, which is what they are, really competent enough to complete a job survey? And that question is about not just their competence, but the legal definition of competent or the legal definition of qualified. So in other words, we're trusting them to go out to the job site and to measure up the job site to produce a price, but we're also trusting them to go out there and discharge our responsibilities with regard to identifying existing and predictable hazards on the job, which will form part of a plan, which then becomes a price, and then becomes a blueprint for the job to move ahead. And part of that competent person's responsibility would be to survey the job and to gather the information required to plan and to mitigate any of those hazards that they find. And those hazards will find themselves into a discussion about, you can't put a machine here, it has to go there because of, for instance, overhead power lines, trenching, underground voids such as basements or underground car parks, and to find a way to deal with those which yes, will impact the price, but secondarily will also impact the plan and the hazard communication and the training. And the question is right now, is this being done consistently and in a way that establishes protection for the equipment owner and or the rental company? Because the equipment owner or the rental company is essentially saying, Mr. Salesman, here is our liability. We want you to go out and manage some of that by planning the job to mitigate against existing and predictable hazards. So are our sales personnel absolutely qualified to do that? So one of the ways I think in which we can help them with that is if we all use the same documentation and procedures as an industry. In other words, to collaborate to help to protect ourselves. We are a small industry, but we're a really important industry. We all know each other very well, and we all compete, yes, but we all have the same raison d'etre at the end of the day, which is we want to make sure our industry performs safely, and we want to make sure that we help our customers to be safe and to make money. And if we do those two things, then our product will be in constant demand. So it's a really important exercise. So one of the things that Brad and I have talked about is, you know, we have some SCIA tip sheets which came through part of the SCIA alliance with OSHA. And those tip sheets are for safe use of the product, ground conditions and what to think about when planning an installation with regard to ground conditions, and tying to the structure. These 3 tip sheets are currently available on the SCIA Alliance website. So one of the things that Brad and I talked about was, well, we've got 3 of those tip sheets right now, and I know that I include them in my training courses, and I know of others who include them in theirs. That's very good information and advice. Why don't we think about a tip sheet to deal with the job survey and a tip sheet to think about duty of care? Now, they don't have to be alliance tip sheets. That's a rather elongated process to have to go through initially. But we would ask the SCIA and our members if the tip sheets could be an SCIA product, a committee or a council product, a website product, to augment the existing 3 tip sheets. And what would they look like? Here is a mock-up of how the job survey tip sheet might look. And this is a discussion document, and anyone who would like to have a copy of this to mull over and to think about after the presentation is absolutely welcome, of course, to get a copy of this. I guess we can make them centrally available through Jackie or Deanna, or obviously through Brad or myself. But, you know, Mast Climbing Work Platform safety begins with an effective job survey completed by a qualified person. And if it's successfully completed, it will identify the most effective installation plan and identify the existing and predictable hazards to be resolved. The safety tip sheet, their safety tip sheet, is designed to assist in identifying many of those main aspects. So the tip sheet begins by saying, look, what's the primary purpose of the equipment? What do you want it for? Because establishing the primary purpose for the equipment can provide information on many other aspects of the installation plan. The primary purpose will help identify the capacity. If the primary purpose is for block work, you know what the capacity is required. If it's for stucco, you know that you don't need all of that capacity. And that transfers itself into then the speed of the equipment. If it's a piece of equipment for block work, it's going to be a slow-moving, high-capacity unit. If it's a piece of equipment for stucco, it's going to be a fast-moving, lighter capacity unit. So that's identified what the customer expects. It's also then going to have an impact on the configuration. or configurations. That configuration or configurations will then determine the number of sets and the number of repositions and the number of, and the likely duration of the project or the duration of the existence of the equipment on the job site. It will also affect other things like planking. And all of these things go together to produce a layout plan and a price. So the primary purpose is a vital piece of information and a very good piece of information to know up front. We're then asking, as part of the job survey, that our personnel assess the ground conditions. Can the ground underneath the mast positions take the weight of the units proposed? Not only today, but throughout the duration of its existence in that location. Are there any underground protrusions like basements, car parks, which might require shoring? Can we make sure that there are no drainage, or there is no drainage or trenching work scheduled in and around the vicinity of the mast climber chassis base plate mud cell area? And also we can refer them to the existing SAIA OSHA Alliance tip sheet on ground conditions for further information and the assessment of those ground conditions. Then we come on to the subject of mast placement. Will any of the masts block emergency egress from the structure? That's a consideration. When they're walking around the job, we want them to be looking for any voids, balconies, step-ins, which may affect the positions of the masts. Are there any overhead power lines near the intended equipment positions? Are there any future crane or hoist installations planned which may interfere with or be close in proximity to existing mast positions? Then we want to know about mast attachment. Our operational people need this information. How will the mast be attached to the structure? What will the tie intervals be? For instance, are we talking about 10 foot between slabs or 14 or 15 feet between slabs? The tie-in, the number of tie-ins will obviously be or can be different depending on the structure itself and the intervals. Is there any reinforcement post-tension cables present in the slab which could affect anchor depth? Will the parapet detail affect the ability to use it for an anchor position, or will it affect the anchor positions? And again, we can refer at that point to the existing SAIA OSHA Alliance tip sheet on tying to the structure for more detail. We also need information on general site conditions. Is there an identified laydown and storage area on the job site? Is there any available access for delivery trucks and company vehicles? Are there any mast positions near the site entrance or high traffic areas that we might need to protect? Is there an orientation process required for operational staff? What are the site rules on fall protection? For example, PPE, debris netting. The amount of calls that I get from people who say, I've turned up on this job and all of a sudden they tell me that there's a 100% tie-off rule. Really, it would be nice to know that way in advance so that we can plan for it, facilitate for it, or go back to the GC and say, hey, we don't need it, or here is our other solution. But when people turn up on a job site and they get that kind of information, it's way too late in the game. There are also general contractors who will say that I don't care if you have a guardrail or not. If it leaves the ground, it requires to be 100% debris netted. That's something that needs to be flagged way earlier in the process. Are there site requirements for certification? For example, do the operational staff require OSHA 30 or forklift licenses or rigging and signalling qualifications? These are all things that we should be finding out when we're walking the job. And what are the chemical control and cleanup requirements? Example, spill kits. What SDS information is required to be submitted? We also need to know, in the dismantle phase, will the tower crane be available? The usual answer is never, but we really need to know that, because the problem is if we use the tower crane to erect it, we have to make sure that the tie spacings are applicable to manual disassembly. Will stability be affected by anchor removal during dismantle? We need to know. Will there be truck access for equipment removal? And then lastly, training. What will the training requirements be throughout the project duration in terms of operator training? Or are a number of contractors intending to use the equipment and therefore different trainings will be required? And what type of training will be required? Is it all operator training, or is there an element of installer training required on the job? And although this is not an exhaustive list, the tip sheet could provide guidance on general considerations that are necessary to be able to fully compile an installation plan. Additional specific job conditions may require further analysis and consideration, but some of the questions in this tip sheet may flag up those extra considerations as part of the process. So this is the first tip sheet that we thought would be useful for the industry, an SAIA product that could go out as general good advice and information through the council's webpage. So what I'm hoping to do is, at the end of the presentation, if you have any questions or any contribution to make on these subjects, then we'll deal with those at the end. Now, part of that process is how would that find its way into a live rental situation. And so what I'd like to do at the moment is pass over the mic to Brad to basically talk about how this becomes reality in the rental world. Brad, if you'd like to just take this slide, then that'd be great.
Sure, thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Kevin spoke about, we all know that a safe and successful job starts with a good plan. And in order for us to gather the information in order to execute a plan, we need someone out there, as Kevin specified, whether it's a sales rep or an estimator that's qualified enough to identify all of the hazards associated with doing the job and then executing the job in an efficient way, in a timely manner as well. So this is just an example of one of the surveys that we use here internally to identify not only the hazards associated with doing the job, but some of the things relative to what Kevin covered as far as how we get into the job, how we're tying to the structure, and really all of the information that's going to be relative to the job. So, and really all of us, hopefully all of us are using something that's either similar in the information that's gathered, and although there may be some differences specific to the type of unit manufacturer, the type of power, whether it's gas or electric, everything that Kevin just reviewed in the tip sheet, and everything he and I have discussed, and hopefully you're all in agreement. I'd like to hear some comments at the end of the presentation. Most of those items are consistent with what any competent or qualified person should be looking for prior to commencing a job. So again, this is just an example. We use a survey that allows for drop-down boxes, and that we feel as though that makes it a lot easier for the person that's evaluating the job beforehand to not overlook anything. You know, there's a lot going on the job sites. There's a lot of different things that our people are looking for. There's a lot of distractions as well. So we want to make sure that being able to access the information is easy, but being able to not overlook any, we want to make sure that that person's not overlooking any of the information as well. So this type survey is not the be all and the end all, but what we want to do is make sure whatever you're using, whatever we're using industry wide, covers the gamut from a safety perspective specifically, and then of course allowing our people to get in there and efficiently do the job. And you can, again, this is just an example, but if I don't think any of the items that are covered here are you know, not common to any of our Mast timer installations, whether it's no matter who the manufacturer is or who the rental company is. These are all critical pieces of information. So you know, we're hoping not necessarily in the absence of using a survey, the tip sheet will allow for owners, users, operators to easily access some guidelines that'll help them to better survey a job when they're going out to look at a job, and really remind them of the things that are going to be critical to the safe execution of the job. I mean, in closing, it's not necessarily, it's the primary use is obviously identifying all of the hazards associated with doing the job, but there's a lot of helpful information in there too to allow for, I think we've all lived some of the experiences when we're doing a mast climber job or any type of job really, whether it's a swing or scaffold job, of how we actually access the job, how we get into the job, how our trucks get into the job, our laydown areas, our training, as Kevin talked about, or anything that's site specific. So this information is really helpful and really allows our people to gather everything that they need to safely execute the job and do it in a manner that brings it in, you know, obviously taking customer service and bringing the job in on time and on budget as well. So a lot of good detail. Hopefully we're all using something that's similar. And Kevin and I are proposing to then add the tip sheets to allow for someone to access these items as well and put them into practice. So with that being said, unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Brad.
So I have a couple of questions here, guys.
James, can I leave the questions to the end, because I've already had some people flagging in the questions.
Sure.
If I just
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good, bud. I just wanted to introduce the next topic for the tip sheet area, and then we'll definitely deal with the questions at the end. Another subject that's come up in our topics for discussion recently in our council meetings is owners' duty of care responsibilities, and normally with regard to inspection and maintenance and repair. And I think we all know that we'd love to encourage these to be less sporadically done, right? But, you know, and we'd also like to make sure that the people who are doing it are qualified. And we'd also really like it if records were kept. But the reality is that these things are still within certain factions of the industry rarely done, and it'd be nice to find a way to continually encourage more improvement in that area, or in these areas. And so the second proposal, or the proposed tip sheet, would be an SAIA tip sheet on duty of care for the equipment. So again, a little bit of a preface: mast climbing work platform owners and users have responsibilities under OSHA and ANSI to maintain the equipment while under their care and custody. The following information is intended as a guide to identify what the regulations would require. So the first aspect is qualified service/maintenance staff, and the question would be: are your staff fully qualified to carry out user or owner required inspections? That would be daily / pre-use inspection. On many occasions now there's a weekly inspection required. Certainly there's a frequent / 3-month inspection that's required by manufacturer and by ANSI. and similarly an annual inspection. So the first part of the tip sheet is to remind owners and users of equipment with whatever inspection responsibilities they have decided to take on, is that the people who are doing them require to be qualified to do that. The second part for owners is record keeping. And it's good practice to have a history file on each Mast climbing work platform containing the last 3 years of annual inspections. That's an ANSI requirement. The required frequent inspections since the last annual, details of any major repairs to the equipment, and a record of manufacturer's authorization for those repairs. It's really good practice if you're going to make a major repair to make sure the manufacturer is okay with it and get their advice or input on it. Details of any structural repairs and a record of the manufacturer's okay for that. If you're going to get into the world of repairing platform sections and all these other structural areas, it would be absolutely the most sensible thing you could do to make sure you get the manufacturer's input and okay on it. Component control. Simple things like, do you have identified areas in the yard for equipment ready, for equipment that's come in that's identified for repair, for a scrap/disposal area for equipment that you know is not going to be used again and has to be properly scrapped or disposed of. And then a quarantine area, maybe for equipment that's waiting for a manufacturer's authorization to do something, or an opinion from the manufacturer on whether it can be repaired or not, or how it could be repaired. Then operational procedures. For instance, are you conducting pre-delivery inspections? It's interesting actually when you talk to owners of equipment and you ask, do you inspect the equipment when it comes back in from rent? And the answer is absolutely. Why? Because it generates an invoice. And then you say, well, do you inspect the equipment before it goes out? And there's not so many yeses. So it's good practice, absolutely, to make sure that you're indicating by paperwork that the equipment is being inspected and is therefore good for use before you rent the equipment out. Our installation personnel completing handover paperwork before turning the equipment over for use, including serial numbers, including the configuration of the equipment as they built it and tested it, including details of the job site the customer and the primary use is identified. You know, if you built the equipment to be used by the stucco contractor and it's medium duty equipment with a relatively low capacity for somebody who's doing block or brick, and then all of a sudden the block or the brick guy gets on and starts using it, it'd be good if you had detail to indicate that you didn't build it for that purpose if something were ever to go wrong. And that the paperwork should indicate a transfer, a formal transfer of the responsibility for inspection and safe use to the user company at that point. And then it would also be good to have on that paperwork a list of the initially trained operators on the job. Next, it would be good if this tip sheet talked about general procedures. A reminder to say if you're using, or are you using, proprietary critical components when replacing? If you do not, do you have the manufacturer's permission? You know, are you not using the manufacturer's equipment to tie to the structure and replacing it with something that you rigged up yourself? These critical components are critical for a reason. And if they fail, and if you haven't used the manufacturer's components, or if you have replaced them, then you're in a position of some liability should something go wrong. Are you periodically checking to verify with the user company that daily or pre-use inspections are being completed and recorded? Just about any manufacturer will have a piece of paper available with the ability to record daily inspections on there. It will provide a list of what needs to be recorded, check boxes for if it has been recorded, and usually a signature to say who recorded them or who did the checks. Are you periodically checking to verify with the user company that there are trained personnel on the equipment? This is something that I've been talking to our salespeople about, which is, if I've got a sales guy going on a job and he gets on the job and he sees the equipment being used and he doesn't recognize the people on the equipment and knows that they haven't been trained and that they should be trained, I want the sales guy qualified to do the operator training. I don't want him walking off the job and saying, I'm going to call the office and get somebody out here to train, because you know what's going to happen when he leaves the job site. They're going to use it anyway. So whoever gets on the job and whoever establishes that training is required, I really want everybody to at that point be qualified to do it with the training materials. Are you periodically checking to verify that there is no unauthorized equipment, use of the equipment on the job site? So these are things that come under the heading of duty of care. And although not an extensive or exhaustive list, the sheet provides guidance on general considerations that would be necessary to be able to exercise appropriate duty of care obligations, to know what's happening to your equipment, to know that you're looking after it properly. Valid questions. So again, as Brad and I had talked about, we'd propose that you would have a look at the idea of a duty of care SAIA tip sheet. And we would absolutely welcome contributions, contents on content and any comments that you have on any of this. The last thing I want to talk about before we kind of have a discussion period is COVID-19 operator training. We've got all the states beginning to open up now. Many of the job sites that were going, maybe on a skeleton staff basis, are now beginning to look at opening up. Certainly there are new jobs that are ready to kick off that have been delayed. And part of that is going to be the requirement for operator training. The question is, what do we need now to consider when we're doing operator training? And so the question is there something that we feel as members of the SAIA that we could collectively put out there as information and guidance for anyone who is thinking about conducting operator training on the job sites in the near or medium future? And so I wanted to talk about something that we may want to look at, consider, and maybe introduce as SAIA guidance. And the document will begin with some general advice about doing the 5, which is hands, wash them immediately before training commences. Face, don't touch it and wear a mask. Elbow, cough or sneeze into it. Feet, stay 6 feet apart at all times during the training. If closer distance is necessary, make sure that a mask is worn by both and minimize the close working time. If it's only for a couple of minutes, then it should only be a couple of minutes. If you feel sick, immediately notify the trainer and leave the training and notify employers for action. So if the instructor or the trainer should be introducing the concept of the 5 to trainees before the training takes place. If any trainer or trainee has had to leave the training due to illness and subsequently is confirmed with COVID-19, he or she must follow their employer reporting procedure and should advise their employer and also notify the trainer who is conducting the class, because there will be other actions that will be required from the employers of the others on the training course. So some general advice that we may want to look at. Preparation for the course, overview and general safety. Additional measures right now. Additional trainer PPE. Trainers will need to, I think, wear masks and gloves. Trainees, similarly, would be asked to wear masks and gloves. And also, if they refuse to wear them, should we be saying to them that they should not be allowed to attend or take part in the training? What supplies does the trainer and the trainee need? Well, we're going to need some kind of test paper, practical assessment, pre-use inspection sheet to go through the pre-use inspection, and even stupid things that we don't think about on a daily basis, like everybody should have their own pen. We can't be passing out pens and collecting them in now at the end of the training. And we don't want pencils, and I'll explain why as we go through the process. We probably should have a trainee attestation sheet, one per trainee, to say that they are fit to be able to take part in the training and that they have not displayed any symptoms of COVID-19 in the past 14 days. A trainer should probably have a cleaning sterilisation kit for machine controls. Once the practical part of the test is taking place and the prospective operators are on the machine, after each one has operated the equipment, probably there needs to be a sanitisation process before the next trainee appears on the equipment. A copy of the operating section of the owner's manual, one per trainee, which we give out and we don't get back. They keep it. If there's a classroom aspect to it, we need to inspect the classroom for the ability to achieve social distancing. There will be a chart that I'll look at in a moment with respect to how we might achieve that. If the classroom is unsuitable and if there is no suitable alternative, it will be preferable to conduct the classroom section probably on the machine, weather permitting, or in part of the structure of the building, in an area which gives plenty of space and room. So before the training commences, each trainee should complete the trainee attestation sheet, and when complete, the trainer would photograph the completed document, but the trainee should retain the document so that the trainer has a record of it without actually taking it back from the trainee. Pre-use inspection. During the daily inspection section, arrange trainees to stand 6 feet apart and 6 feet away from the unit. We have to respect distancing while the others are waiting to go through that daily inspection part. One trainee at a time should go through the details of the inspection while reviewing the entries on the pre-use daily inspection sheet. They should retain their copy of the inspection sheet. Again, the trainer needs to manage the social distancing during this part. Safe operation. Trainees need to be arranged to stand apart at distances and in positions that they were in during the pre-use inspection. One trainee at a time is the idea. And for instance, here we see a situation where we have a machine, an instructor, a trainee at the controls, and then the other trainees spaced waiting to then take their turn on the equipment to be able to get used to the controls, to respect the social distancing. In the operator's manual review, there's a written test. The trainees should still fill out the test. They should keep their test papers. The trainer should then talk through the answers, and the trainees will mark correct or not on their test papers. And that's the reason for only now in pen, because we can now see if they have changed any answers or if they have changed the correct from the wrong answer to the correct answer, and we need to manage that. But at the end, the trainer will be confident that they have correctly marked their test score on the paper. Again, pedantics. We want them to mark the test score on the top right of the front page of the test next to their name, and then we want to have them hold that test paper up in front of them and photograph it so that we have a record. And in the class, we need to have some kind of plan for trainees to observe social distancing, and similarly for the instructor. And then when it comes to the trainer wrap-up, when we ask the trainee to stand in for a photograph that respect, and again in an area that respects social distancing, we've got the usual hats and face coverings need to be removed for the photograph, so trainer needs to be 6 feet away. The candidate's written test paper containing their name and score on the front will be held up chest height for inclusion in that photograph. The candidates will retain their test paper, daily inspection form, and operator's instructions. The trainer will then retain the practical assessment, because the trainer will have been in possession of that all the way through, and will retain the pictures on the telephone. Then when they need to use those pictures, maybe to produce the training card, they can crop the picture to take out the test paper part and retain it, saved as a separate picture, passport picture of the trainee. That will give the trainer all of the information he or she needs. Lastly, there needs to be a cleaning and sanitization of the classroom tables, the chairs, door handles, etc. if classroom training was done. So this is some of the stuff that Brad and I thought we could look to the SAIA and to our members for, is 2 new tip sheets available on the website for the job survey advice to our sales personnel, and also duty of care to owners and users of equipment. And also a procedure for the management of social distancing and sanitization processes during operator training. In terms of new business, we're looking for member ideas for future meetings. Obviously, we're always looking for that. Speakers, topics, challenges. Maybe by the time we get to the next meeting, we may be together in an auditorium somewhere, maybe. Or maybe we have to bring up other challenges at that point at the next meeting with regard to COVID, if it still exists at that point. But we're looking for ideas from members for future meetings. We're looking for ideas about how we can train and recruit and look at industry challenge creative solutions. You know, how can we attract new people into the industry? How can we make it more sexy for them? Because right now it's not, that's for sure. And maybe that's down to us, I don't know. But it's not a sexy industry right now. It's a bit like the mason industry will tell you the same story. They're finding it very difficult to bring youngsters into the business. And we understand why, but there must be a way to attract them. SAIA question, what more can the SAIA do to support the members at the moment? Do you feel like there's anything else the SAIA can do for us or for you? Sharing of ideas and resources. One of the things that I think would help us as an industry is commonality of documents. So we're all using documentation that comes from a single point source, i.e. an SAIA tip sheet. And then we're creating documents that essentially look, 90% the same. As Brad said, we're going to have differences in documentation, sure. But if it's 90% the same throughout our industry, we have got an amazing defense mechanism for our liability going forward. If all of our industry is following similar practices and everything begins to look similar. And the last one is, what can we do to collaborate? We are a small industry. We don't step on each other's toes too often out there, but we can collaborate. And the more that we collaborate, and the more that we have common practices, the stronger we will be in our defence, the stronger we will be in the way that we move forward with safe working practice. So I'd ask, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I would ask if anyone has any comments or any discussion. We've got about 15 minutes to alcohol consumption time. So I'd like to ask if anyone would like to jump in. I didn't expect anything less from you, James.
Well, you know, I do have an image to upkeep, and that's part of it. So, a couple things. One on the tip sheet for our representatives in the field, if you will. I think most of us are using something. I think the tip sheet is a good idea, but I think it needs to be more of a tip sheet rather than a form, if you will. You know, tips, you know, 15 bullet points, 20 bullet points, whatever you want to say. These are the items that we suggest you pre-examine instead of more of a form. Now, if we want to look into a form, that's something we could look into if we wanted to. But my thoughts on that is, in the sample you guys were showing, there were drop-down boxes. I think the idea would be to make something that's printable, therefore you wouldn't have drop-down boxes. Follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I'd qualify just a little bit, James. The tip sheet itself would be something that we would propose would be an SAI product. What emanated from that, which was Brad's example of what they use with drop-down boxes, we're not at the moment suggesting that that should be an SAIA document. We're suggesting that that would be an individual document that would be that would have a degree of commonality, but that would essentially be inspired or derived by the questions on the tip sheet.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to blend all this back together because I lost the train of thought on all of it as we were going forward, and I was trying to keep notes here. So bear with me. But I know it was. That being said, I do think it's a good idea to go forward with. I like the idea of doing that, but I also wanted to throw an idea for one more tip sheet out there. Something that we've dabbled in for 4 or 5 years now in conjunction with the Cranes and Derricks, is maybe coming up with a material handling attachments, if you will, tip sheet. I'm trying to get away from calling it a hoist, crane arm, jib arm, all these other terms. I'm trying to defer my guys from using that term, so maybe it kind of pulls it away from that thought process. I'm thinking maybe if we do a little more on our end to show that we are managing that attachment, maybe it would give Cranes and Derricks a little more room to go, hey, maybe we need to exclude these more and get us away from there. So I'm thinking maybe a tip sheet there.
James, that was something that I had thought about, and I thought about it in 2 ways. One is in the way that you've been thinking there about it. The second part that I thought was, should we be making reference to the inspection of rigging equipment, right? You know, like a rigging signaling type thing.
Right.
You know, where, you got like for instance, if they're examining their lifting cable, right? You know, you've only got X amount of breaks, over a lay, the distance it takes, the rotation of the cable. You know, there's criteria there that are absolutely something that anyone who is using that equipment on our machines should be trained in and aware of, right? Stupid things like, what's that thing you're lifting? How much does it weigh, and what's the capacity of the machine you're using to lift it, right? You know, and if they don't know that basic information, then shame on them, because they should, and they're in danger of somebody closing the job down if they ask that and it's not forthcoming. So some kind of combined document there, which would be, here's what it is, here's how you use it, absolutely differentiate it, and then also on there maybe information on inspecting your rigging equipment, the knowledge that you would need to have, and then maybe even the half or a dozen or so basic hand signals that should be used in the signaling process as well.
Right, I agree, but I think it's something we need to sit down as a group and say, hey, how do we attack this, and get something out there that shows that we are, in fact, trying to lead our own industry in what we're doing, and we need to let.
Julie noted. Yep.
Kevin and Brad, do you think we need different training for a competent salesperson different than we do the training for a director operator?
I think, Barney, I'm not sure if it's the same. Where I'm coming from on training the sales guy is I see a lot of sales guys out there who haven't been through the E&D training, right?
Right.
And they're never going to be E&D guys, right?
Right.
But they're out there making decisions for the E&D guys, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And
this will work.
yeah, and I come up against a lot of objections from owners saying, I'm not putting them through an E&D course, that's too expensive, right? So the question I've got is, you know, on the assumption that they're going out there and doing the job they're doing, at least if we can produce something that says, here's what we'd like you to consider, detail, and bring back to the office.
Like a checklist or something?
Yeah, you know, I don't think for a minute that you know, it would be nirvana to imagine that all our sales guys were out there were E&D trained and certified, right? Mm-hmm. I just don't see it being a reality. What I would like is I think it'd be a great idea for all the sales guys to be aware of all the E&D considerations, right? Maybe via that checklist. I'd also think it'd be a fantastic idea if they were able to do operator training.
Yeah.
You know, so, but I think I might be, you and I might be romantically thinking that owners are going to step up to that level of responsibility, right? And and I know the reality is that they might not. Yes. But if we can encourage them to at least think about gathering the relevant information, it might be a step in the right direction, you know. Yep. You and I will be dead before sales guys are E&D qualified to that level, I think.
Sure.
That and competent person sales guy is an oxymoron.
Yeah. Well, you can take the oxy, take the oxy part away, and you're left with you.
Hey guys, let's don't beat up salespeople totally.
I was just thinking, can we train salespeople like that?
Hi,
well,
Kevin.
Yeah. Hi, Al.
Hi there. The Suspended Scaffold Council had a job site survey sheet that we made. It's old, but it might be of use. Unfortunately, we, back in the dark ages, had them printed in tablet form and they got thrown away. Okay. So it's a matter of marketing the product. If there's no need for it or it's not put in a way that people felt was necessary, I use it still. Yeah. It said, look for this, look for that, look for overhead wires, look for things of, how do you get on the job? Which is your path? Is the elevator big enough? There were questions, and I thought it was brilliant. But then apparently other people must have been smarter.
Yeah, to your point, Harold. I know we used to, when I started in the swing business, we used to use something that's very similar. That it was handwritten. It was on a tablet, as you said. And now, with the advances in technology, we're always looking for faster and better ways to do things. But I think the important part is, and we struggle with that as well, as how much information is what we're using now, gathering enough information, the right information as to what we used before. And is a sales rep going to really or the estimator going to take the time needed? It's a lot easier to handwrite some things than punch it into an iPad or not. So those are just struggles that we all deal with. But I think the most important part is making sure that our guys and girls are using something, right? Because the information is, the success of that job, as I said earlier, is relative to the information that's provided in order to put that plan together. So I don't necessarily know there's a right way or a wrong way of doing it, old school, new school, but as long as we're taking the time to gather that information and put it into practice, that's the important part, I think, for the industry. But that's a great suggestion. I like what we used 20 years ago more so than what we use today, but that's just me.
I like that. Now, at the same time, it needs to make sure it doesn't turn into be 4 or 5 pages long, because then
exactly, yeah,
concise,
short and complete,
and relative.
Listen, I've always been of the opinion that you can only trust people in the industry with one piece of paper. You give them 2, they're going to lose one, right? So I've always based it on a one piece of paper idea.
Yeah, short and complete.
Yeah, exactly.
Like to thank you too, and the entire council for putting together really, really good information today.
Thank you.
Very useful, and probably the best COVID stuff that any of us have seen in weeks, because it all seems to be Xerox copies of everything else. Yours took it to the next step to say, here's what you should do outside of the 5. And, you know, I will take that and immediately turn it into something useful. Good job, guys.
Good, thank
Well,
you.
you can actually thank Kevin for the COVID. If it was up to me, you'd be getting the Xerox copies, just so you know. So.
The only other advantage I found to COVID is you don't have to countenance your asshole family who used to come around and visit with you anymore, right? You all know who I mean, right? But that's the point. I think the point that Brad and I have been discussing is, you know, there's a lot of useful information that we all have in our heads, and there's a lot of useful information that, you know, now that we're all sitting at home trying to figure stuff out, you know, it's kind of pouring out, right? You know, there's stuff coming out all the time that you don't have time to do normally. And so the idea would be to share as much of it as possible, and any of it that we can turn into an SAIA information product is good for the industry, good for the SAIA, and you know, it's good for the people who are out there who might even read it someday. You never know, you know. So that was the idea.
Hey Kevin, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can, Jay, yes.
I'd like to compliment you on the job you've done. I think that the first 2 sheets are excellent, and it's a good step. I think where that gets us to, though, is we collect the information at the job site level, we bring it back. Hopefully we estimate the job properly, and we make sure we send the right materials to the job. But how do we communicate to the installers how to install it? How do we communicate effectively to the job or to the installer so they install it correctly? And then sign off. We didn't use the word drawing at all, and I don't know if that was purposefully to stay away from that.
It was, yeah.
And also method statement.
Well, let me say that you know, I was taking baby steps, right? Because the next part of that process would be what we had previously talked about, which was some kind of code of conduct, and what would it look like? Now, I don't mean to use the term to describe it, but the elements that were in my mind are elements that have bugged me for years, right? There should be a drawing, right? There should be an installation drawing. That drawing needs to make absolute sense, and it comes out of the quality of the information from the survey, right? That's the first thing, you know. And there are things that I relate to the rental side every day, right? You have to have an operational meeting between the sales guy and the operations guy before the job starts, right? To discuss the drawing, to discuss what they found, to discuss any abatement plans and any training or whatever else, right? And even stupid things like, you know, one of the things that's bugged me for years is that the sales guys seem to have more authority than the operational guys, right? You know, and this was amplified recently where, you know, I was talking to a rental guy, a friend of mine in the UK, and he said, can you believe it? He said, I send my operational guys on the job, the yard guy doesn't turn up, so the sales guy who's got a forklift license loads the first 2 trucks for the guys on a brand new job for Balfour Beatty, right? And the first thing that gets on the job is 2 truckloads of mass sections and no drive units, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's a process to this, and so the tip sheets were kind of to say, here's the beginning of the building blocks. You know, if you take the 2 that we were proposing, plus the 3 that already exist, and tying to the structure, ground conditions, and safe use, we've got the beginnings of what could be then moving on to phase 2, Jay, which would be, okay, how do we then look at the operational aspects? You know, if you like, the layout drawings, how that is then transferred from the sales guy through the layout drawing to the operational. What do the operational guys then informationally need on the job site? Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. The more we can build that, you know, but the idea also is to raise the game of our industry, but to maintain a level playing field all the way through. Because if you and I and Brad and James or whoever apply all of this, there's a cost to it. And unless we drag everybody else with us kicking and screaming, then everybody else is going to get the benefit from it. And conversely, we'll also get the ass end of it. Not only are we going to get beat on price, but we're also going to be the guys who suffer when one of the machines falls over and it doesn't say Joe Smith Mason just threw a machine over in the street. What it says is the mass climber industry killed 2 people, right? So we have to find a way, I think, to inspire everybody's behaviour and find a way to drag everybody along with us as we do this, you know.
No, I would certainly agree on that.
Kevin, to Jay's point, I think about the drawings, this between the sales and the installation guys. I mean, really, if you have an engineered drawing, it's the engineering drawings are going to rule how those units are going to be installed properly.
Yeah, I think so. I think and I think honestly, I spend a lot of time looking at layout drawings now. You know, it's almost become, you know, kind of de rigueur to produce an installation drawing for each job. And the only thing that I think is that I have seen that causes a problem with installation drawings is the information that's used to produce it in the first place. You know, this where the sales guy doesn't see, you know, the fire exit door, and then the guys get on the job and it's like, you can't put a mast there, you know.
That's when you started.
Yeah, and you know, and now you've got to move it 10 foot to the right, and now you've got a cantilever that's already at the maximum length, and somebody wants to put an extra 10 feet on it because the mast isn't there anymore. And that's when they get this kind of, and I don't mean to make fun of your beard, but that's when they have this strokey beard meeting on the job where they all go, oh yeah, let's put another 10 foot on that. It's only for 2 weeks, right? You know, and that's the beginning of the erosion, you know. So that's why we're thinking the more quality information that's gathered initially produces a better drawing, layout drawing for the job for operational, you know, purposes, you know, and it's absolutely the case.
When things go wrong, it all goes to the fine print.
Yeah, yeah.
But there seems to be an industry pushback on requiring a drawing.
Yeah, you know.
And that's something I don't get, because how else do you communicate properly where to put that base, where to do your ties?
On a napkin, you know that.
I thought you worked in New York.
I'm not saying that we don't do it. I'm saying that there's a pushback by the industry.
Well, the pushback is the term engineered drawing, because to do a drawing and a layout drawing is one thing, but to go pay an engineer to stamp it every time you do a job or move a machine is the pushback. We do CAD drawings and layout drawings for, you know, every job that we do. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's technically a quote unquote engineered drawing. So I think that's the pushback is the type of drawing you're I guess alluding to.
James, I think there's 2 ways to look at that, and I tend to look at it operationally, right? I don't particularly think it needs an engineer stamp on it at all. There may be jobs where it does. For instance, if there is a shoring plan underneath from a car park or something, then you know there's the degree of technicality may require it. But right. I'm also met a lot of engineers who don't know who don't know the realities of what we do on a job site. You know, and the other part of that is, what if you do have an engineer drawing and you go to the job and something's changed? Somebody dug a trench somewhere and now you've got to move a machine. Does that mean a new engineer's drawing? So I think there are clearly jobs where engineer drawings are everyday occurrences. There are other areas where a layout drawing is sufficient as long as it's being produced by a qualified person, and that's right. The point. You know,
I agree with that. But I think, like I said, when Jay said he sees a lot of resistance from the field or from the industry, I think that is the resistance. It's not necessarily a resistance against a drawing. It's a resistance against
the engineer thing. Yeah,
a certified engineered drawing for every job.
Yeah.
So
the reality.
Let me ask you this: can you just not build it into your price?
Well, it's not just that,
well,
Michael. It's we can build it into the price, but then when everything changes on the job, if you were lucky enough to get the money for it in the first place, you're going to have to pay for it again to change because it's changed on the job. You know, a lot of the time, the engineer part of it, the guys who produce it haven't even seen the job site.
So I live with that every day at New York City, so I can guarantee you at least 80% of the time the drawing is being amended. Yeah. And again, for going back to what you said, changes on job sites. So,
Yeah,
and then modifications afterwards. So
you know, the industry has successfully existed without the absolute need for a stamped engineer drawing, but the industry has also succeeded because it produces quality layout drawings, and that's where James is making the important difference, I think. Layout drawings, absolutely. The problem I've got with a layout drawing is the sales guy wants a layout drawing to sell the job. And so you produce a layout drawing to sell the job. And in other words, number of sets, length of machines, how many machines, corner returns, expansion joints, you know, the discussion before the price. And then what happens is that becomes the blueprint for the job. It's not the blueprint for the job, it was a sales aid, you know. And the relevance sometimes is lost in that. The sales guy then presents that, everybody retains it, and then when it has to change, everybody says, well, wait a minute, the blueprint said this, but it was not a blueprint. That's my problem, is that every day they're producing a sales aid, which is not really the job plan. You know, it was generated for a different purpose. But the layout drawing, a proper operational layout drawing, is absolutely something that we should be looking for, because it absolutely makes sure that the right kind of information is conveyed all the way along the supply chain.
You get all the answers, all the questions answered per your original tip sheet, you should get pretty close to it. But down in Texas, our general contractors down our way, more and more so, want PE stamps on almost everything we do, whether it's scaffold flooring or mast climbers. They want things done the right way to protect their owner or the, you know, on the project. And we're finding that more and more so, everything has to be PE stamped.
Yeah, I know, and there are geographical areas where that's happening. I'm not saying you should, but I have asked the question before, and I got a kind of weird look on the guy's face when I said it. But you know, my question is a PE actually qualified to produce the drawing if he's never been on the job site?
Or never seen a mast climber.
Gene, how are you actually handling that with the general contractor that's asking for a PE stamp drawing on a scaffold that's basic, pretty basic, not a height, not 120 feet tall, you've done 1 million of them, but just because of the location, they're asking for that stamp. And what are you doing?
Yeah, but honestly, I'm arguing every time that happens. I'm arguing that the PE is 99% of the time not qualified to produce it because he or she is not on the job, and unless they see the ground conditions for stability and all of these other operational considerations that we have, they're not qualified.
They look from Google Earth.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case here all the time in New York. They actually do site fixing. They have to sign it off after we're completed.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, I spent a lot of time up there and with the Cranes and Derricks division, Mike, and you know they have what they have. You know, they're not going to change. They believe it covers their ass, you know, this type of thing. But the way I relate it is very simple, right? There are some manufacturers of scissor lifts whose lawyers tell them that they should demand that people are tied off in a scissor lift. You're in a rectangle, right? The reason they're tied off in a boom lift is because if the basket leveling rod should snap, the boom basket goes from vertical to opposite of vertical in about half a second and the occupant falls out, or they can be bounced out by undulating terrain on a boom lift. You know, to require somebody to be tied off in a scissor lift, and it's not every manufacturer, but it's just really one or two, is kind of belt and suspenders for no reason. Secondly, how are you going to achieve it, right? You can't tie off forward straight in a rectangle, right? It's impossible. You can't do it. So the question then is, you know, why would you ask for it in the first place? Because they think that it's covering their liability. Now, if you're a GC and you get a PE to produce a layout plan and it doesn't take cognizance of ground conditions or anything else that might change on the job, then my argument has always been to them that they're not fully qualified to decide what needs to go where. The person that's qualified is a fully qualified person from the supplier of the equipment who's trained in the safe erection of that equipment and is going through the training to be able to assess how the machine will be stable, the ground conditions, and all these other areas that you can't do from a remote setting. Now, in New York, I know it's different. I know that. And I've argued black and blue with New York over the years. I've been up there a million times arguing with cranes and derricks. I've even went in and trained their crane inspectors who the raw material was interesting. But anyway, they have what they have, right? They're not going to change. And 50% of that is the revenue it generates, let's be honest.
Not going to argue, but the other 50% is the people that are causing the accidents are the ones that aren't on this council right now. You know, the people out there doing what they want to do, causing the accidents. And
that's why I'm pushing a discussion on code of conduct, because I've got general contractors out there right now saying, as soon as you're ready with a code of conduct, we're ready to put it into our bid documents. So in other words, unless you're an SAIA member, then and adhere by the SAIA code of conduct for quality supply of equipment, and it just needs to be bullet points. We do this. They're ready to put that into the bid documents to say, you're not bringing mast climbers onto this job unless you are an SAIA code of conduct adherent. Now, for me, that's a way for us to raise the game of our industry and at the same time begin to drag everybody else along with us.
I'm good with that.